From time to time, I get companies who will submit proposals and they'll say, well, we will do this, but I take exception to this insurance requirement, or I take exception to this bonding requirement, or I take exception to some other technical requirement. You might as well not even submit a proposal. The time to address your concerns. If you're going to look at if you look at our RFP and you see things that you want to take exception, conditions, or qualifiers to, the time to address that is before you submit a proposal, before the Q&A, before the question deadline of the proposal. You'll have ample opportunity to submit your suggestions, your concerns in writing, and give us an opportunity to make modifications if we deem that it's in the best interest of the airport board to do so. And we will issue out an addendum, and we may take that recommended change that you've asked for and include it in an addendum, and therefore making your proposal more acceptable. Of course, we may reject your suggestion. That's really up to the board, and we will certainly review any of those concerns you have very seriously. But making qualifications or exceptions usually kills the opportunity of your proposal to be considered to the interview stage. Conforming proposal will receive further consideration. Your company, its partners, and subcontractors must be prepared for formal interviews. Now, I experienced proposals where a company can write a really good written proposal. They sound great on writing. I mean, they look great, they meet all the requirements, or they look like they meet all the requirements. I mean, they can write some great stuff. But then we interview them, and they can't walk the talk. The things they said they could do in the written proposal, when you get in a little more detail during the interview, you find out typically they can't. I even had recently an interview session where a company that was a finalist actually dropped off the list after their interview because they couldn't walk the talk. So make sure to put the same due diligence in preparing for the interview session that you did in preparing the written portion of the RFP. We'll have many interviews, so please be flexible in accommodating your schedules. We're going to try to get when we have finalist lists, we're going to have interview sessions. We're going to have some specific dates, and we're trying to juggling the schedules of not only your staff and your partners and your subcontractors, but we're also having to gather the people within the airport board that are going to be on the evaluation team, and it's kind of like the old saying, you're trying to herd cats or catch roosters. It's kind of hard to do. You know, it's hard to gather all those schedules together, so please be flexible when we ask you, can you make this interview date and time? Find every way you can to say yes. Prepare visual aids to enhance your concessions concept in an airport environment. Make sure and make the investment to show why your concept works in an airport environment. Visual aids are great for backing up what you submitted in writing and what you're presenting verbally in an interview session. Typically, after an interview session, you could have some questions. Make sure and promptly address those questions and submit those answers in writing. Proposals that make this phase will be evaluated and scored on the same criteria as stated in the RFP. So when you are evaluated on your written proposal on those set of criteria that we publish in the RFP, those same criteria follow throughout the whole process. We don't use a different criteria during the interview phase. We use the same criteria. So it's always consistent. You're always going to be evaluated on the same point scale and on the same criteria. Once we come up with a group of companies that we feel like should be recommended for award, we will submit those to our executive staff and the airport board for consideration. I'm going to ask that we hold off on questions until Peter completes his presentation, and then Peter and I will be more than happy to address any questions with regards to how to submit a proposal.
Thank you. Thanks, Ron. Well, now for the exciting stuff. And it's only exciting because I'm doing it, but I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to tag on to a little bit of Ron's information, so there might be a little bit of overlap, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the components of the RFP. And also don't want to forget to mention to you guys that at the conclusion or toward the end of the presentation today, there will be a video, and the video is going to be kind of a virtual reality video to talk or to demonstrate what the actual new look of the renovated terminals are going to look like. So something to stick around for. And also at the end of the presentation, we will have everybody on the panel available for Q&A, so we can make sure we can address any miscellaneous questions or concerns that may not have been addressed. So the RFP, the actual RFP. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. The actual RFP document is going to be a 25-page document roughly, and it's going to cover all the fundamentals of the RFP, of course. And within that document will also be the exhibits, which will be attached. And the exhibits, of course, are going to be the specifics for the individual locations that are going to go out for bid. They'll include square footage, the actual location, the rent structure, the category and the description we're looking for, as well as the length of term for that particular package. It'll also include the minimum qualifications and immediate disqualifiers, and those are almost synonymous. If you're not meeting the minimum qualifications, then clearly there's going to be a disqualification. And then the RFP document will include some general protocols and policies. I wanted to include this slide because I wanted to demonstrate for you what we're looking for from a good RFP standpoint, and in that having it organized and having it neat and having it properly labeled is very critical. And so I'm showing a photo here of two different RFPs that both were successful for Terminal D because they're both very different, but they were both met the criteria that we're looking for. They both have the tabs, they're organized well. The one on the left is significantly thicker than the one on the right and a little more elaborate, but they're both equally good because they both achieved the goal of having it to be easily reviewed by our panel. So there's not necessarily a right and a wrong way to do it, other than it needs to be organized well and mirror what we're asking for in the RFP document itself. Some key components here with regard to the pass and fail on the left. We talked a little bit about the minimum qualifications and the immediate disqualifiers. Experience. Experience is clearly key in this environment. You would be set up for failure if you were to come into the airport environment and run a concessions operation without having adequate experience. Obviously having experience in non-traditional environments helps prepare you more so for this type of environment than just being out on the street, but street experience is relevant as well. Having a deposit included with your RFP. It seems fundamental, and it seems basic, but it's got to be there. Right now, we're anticipating that the deposit requirement will be about $10,000. Concept fit, I think that Ron mentioned this also. Make sure that you're looking at the RFP very, very closely, and that the concept that you're proposing fits the category that we're looking for. It doesn't make a lot of sense to propose a deli if we're looking for a hamburger concept. Make sure that it's accurate. And then, of course, rental income criteria. Each package is going to have very specific criteria as it relates to minimums on both the percentage rent as well as the minimum annual guarantee to the airport. And if you submit a proposal that doesn't meet those criteria, then it would be an immediate disqualifier. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that talk a little bit about the weighting of our evaluation. Now, the actual weighting is yet to be completely determined, but these are pretty much in order of what we anticipate in terms of the weighting. So in other words, concept operation would probably be the heaviest weighted component of the RFP, followed by experience, followed by the rental income to the airport, followed by overall financial strength, and then followed by the ACDP participation. Now, again, it's conceivable that the last two or three could all be equal. Don't know at this point, but these are the major components that we are looking at in our RFP. Time frames. Obviously, everybody needs to understand what the time frames are, and we're anxious to find that out. Right now, we are probably looking at the early part of September for the release of the RFP. And about 3 weeks after that, a pre-proposal conference will be held, as well as a design and build-out conference. Those two conferences will be held on the very same day sequentially. And then about 4 to 5 weeks after the pre-proposal conference, so basically a grand total of 7 to 8 weeks after the release of the RFP, the proposals will be due. And then the whole process before we get to the board to get approval for the winning the bids will probably be about 5.5 months. We are hoping to go to the board maybe in January or February. The RFP is anticipated, again, as I mentioned, to be released in this says August, September. We're probably looking at September. And more information with regard to that and any kind of updates will be on our website at dfwairport.com/concessions.